Biography of Pablo Escobar. Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria, often referred to as the King of Cocaine, is a notorious Colombian drug dealer. Considered the most daring, most influential, and most criminal in the history of cocaine trafficking, he formed the Medellin Cartel in cooperation with a group of other criminals to ship cocaine to the American market. As the 1970s and 1980s saw Pablo Escobar and the Medellin Cartel close to monopolizing the cocaine smuggling trade in the United States by shipping more than 80% of the country's total drug smuggling. He earned billions of dollars. And by the early 1990s, his net worth was estimated at $30 billion. With total earnings of $100 billion, including money buried in various parts of Colombia. In 1989, according to the American magazine Forbes, he was ranked 7th among the list of the richest people in the world. And he has known an extravagant life with the fortune he made. His empire included 400 luxurious homes around the world, private planes, a private zoo with various kinds of exotic animals, and he had his own army of veteran soldiers and criminals. His vast empire was built on various types of crime, but he was known for sponsoring football clubs and doing charitable projects. Pablo Escobar was born on December 1, 1949, in Riongro, Colombia, to Dared Escobar and Hermelita, the third of his 7 brothers. His father was a farmer and his mother was an elementary school teacher. Pablo studied at the University of Autónoma Latinoamericana, but left the university because he preferred to devote himself to his personal work. His criminal activities began on the streets of Medellin in his teens, when he used to steal tombstones and sell them to smugglers after polishing them. But his brother Roberto Escobar claimed that the tombs were owners of those cemeteries where clients stopped paying for on-site care. Since his childhood, he had a strong desire to become a millionaire at the age of 22. And he carried out his criminal activities alongside Oscar Bernal Egg, which included selling fake lottery tickets, stealing cars, and selling smuggled cigarettes. In the early 1970s, Pablo became a bodyguard and thief, kidnapping a Medellin executive to quickly earn $100,000. His next step in the world of crime was to work with the famous smuggler Alvaro Perito, who was working all over Medellin. Personal life. Pablo Escobar married Maria Victoria in March of 1976, and the couple have 2 sons, Juan, now known as Juan Sebastian Mariquin Santos, and Manuela. Facts about Pablo Escobar. Other popular nicknames for Pablo Escobar were Don Pablo and El Patron. Pablo earned the nickname Robin Hood from the poor, and spent millions on schools, football fields, hospitals, and churches. There have been many series and movies about his story. The most famous sayings of Pablo Escobar. The death of Pablo Escobar. On December 2, 1993. After 15 months of being hunted down by the search block squad created by Colombian President Virgilio Barco with the sole aim of arresting Pablo and his associates, as well as Colombian and American intelligence agencies and one of the anti-IS groups called Los Pepes, he was found in his hiding place and the Colombian police shot him. And the mystery about who shot him in the head is still based on several hypotheses so far. And Pablo's relatives believe that he killed himself. About 25,000 people attended his burial, including most of the poor of Medellin whom he helped on a large scale. And he was buried in the Cementerio Jardins Montesacro Itagüí Cemetery. Achievements. Roberto Escobar worked as an accountant for his brother and worked on the fundraising process, which culminated when the Medellin Cartel smuggled 15 tons of cocaine daily into the United States, worth more than $500 million, where Pablo and his brother were buying rubber bands worth $1,000 a week to pack the packets of cash. And about 10% of the money stored in their warehouse was destroyed every year by rats. Pablo got into the drug trade in the 1970s and developed his own cocaine smuggling operation in 1975. He used to fly himself between Colombia and Panama to smuggle the drug into the United States. In 1975, after returning to Medellin from Ecuador with a heavy load, he was arrested with his men. 39 pounds of drugs were found in their possession. He failed in an attempt to bribe the judges of his case and later killed the 2 officers who arrested him, leading to his case being dropped. He began applying his tactics of bribery and murder to deal with the authorities. Earlier, Pablo smuggled cocaine in old tires and the pilot was paid $500,000 for each flight. Later, when demand for cocaine grew in the United States, he arranged for additional shipments and alternate routes and networks including California and South Florida, and, in collaboration with Carlos Leader, developed Normas Cali Island in the Bahamas as a new transshipment point between 1978 and 1982. Main drug smuggling organization Medellin Cartel. In the mid-1980s, His smuggling activity reached its zenith, smuggling about 11 tons on the trip to the United States. And according to Roberto Escobar, Pablo also used 2 submarines to smuggle cocaine. In 1982, the Colombian Liberal Party elected him as an alternate member of the Colombian House of Representatives, and he officially represented the Colombian government at the swearing-in ceremony of Spanish Prime Minister Felipe González. Several accusations were later brought against Pablo, and one of the allegations against Pablo was his support for the left-wing militants of the April 19th movement who stormed the Colombian Supreme Court in 1985 and killed many judges in the court and destroyed all files and papers while the court is studying an extradition treaty with the United States, and this treaty would have allowed the country to extradite drug traffickers to the United States for prosecution. With the expansion of his network and gaining notoriety, Pablo became known all over the world, and by that time the Medellin Cartel controlled a large part of the drug trade covering the United States, Spain, Mexico, the Dominican Republic, Venezuela, Puerto Rico, and other countries in Europe and America, and rumors were saying that his network had reached Asia. His policy in dealing with the Colombian state was intimidation and corruption through the term plata o plomo, which literally in the dictionary means silver or lead, but in Pablo's dictionary it meant either accepting money or facing bullets. And his criminal activities included the killing of hundreds of state officials, civilians and police and bribery politicians, judges and government officials. By 1989, the Medellin Cartel controlled 80% of the world's cocaine market. And Pablo was generally believed to be the main financier of the Colombian soccer team Medellin's Atlético Nacional, and was also credited with developing multiple sports fields and soccer fields and helping the children's soccer team. Although he was considered an enemy of the Colombian government and the United States, he succeeded in creating goodwill among the poor, and was instrumental in building schools, churches, and hospitals in Western Colombia, and donated money to establish projects for housing the poor. Often helped by the residents of Medellin, they protected him, including hiding him from the authorities. His empire has become so powerful that other drug traffickers allocate 20% to 35% of their profits to him for the smooth shipment of their drugs to the United States. In 1989, he was accused of financing Colombian presidential candidate Luis Carlos Galán, as well as the bombings at the DAS building in Bogotá and on Avianca Flight 203. In 1991, Pablo surrendered to the Colombian government in exchange for not being extradited to the United States and asked the government to be in a special prison on the pretext that he was threatened with death if he entered a traditional prison. The government allowed him to build his own prison called La Catedral, which he turned into a luxury prison, but in July of 1992, it was found that Pablo was carrying out his criminal activities from his prison. So the government tried to convert him to a traditional prison, but he discovered the matter and escaped from his prison, and the authorities chased him for a period of 15 months, during which time the monopoly of Medellin Cartel deteriorated and began to collapse when the police raided offices and killed their leaders.